That could technically double for a vault alarm.
Dun, 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 dun.
How did we find ourselves talking about a diamond heist?
Well, to put it in our simplest terms is we've kind of let on after Chris and I record a podcast. We start kind of shooting ideas around, looking at our list, seeing what we want to do next. We had an itch a couple weeks ago for organized crime. Got to looking into it, was trying to figure it out. Chris says, what about a heist or a raid? That immediately took us to art. We go looking through art, decide, well, diamond raid, that sounds pretty cool. Diamond heist sounds even cooler. We can get a little Italian job in this, some Ocean's 11 maybe. They're robbing a big vault. We ended up deciding on one. In the process of looking for source material for that, we ran onto a future upcoming Netflix documentary about the Millennium Diamond Heist.
We want to get ahead of it. This one is, so there's two really well-known diamond heists, and one of them occurred in Antwerp. That it will be a future episode because that one, I think that one more is akin to like Ocean's 11. It's fucking classy. It's got a little bit of, it's got some like sophistication to it.
They were professionals.
Yes. This is like the fucking town. Like that Ben Affleck, like robbing the armored cars in Boston. And part of me wonders, because this happened in 2000, if, I know that like they said in the movie that like the Southie portion of Boston is like really well known for like armored car robberies. But at the same time, when you're kind of researching that, this has got to come up.
Well, yeah, doing research for this, it doesn't sound like South London's a real safe haven, too.
Yeah.
I'm sure they probably went through and cleaned the shit out of it for the Olympics like they try to do to clean up every city that hosts, but...
Well, and the reason this one is so entertaining is that you look at the guys planning it and you're like, oh, come on. Like, this couldn't even possibly work. And really breaking it down, had they not been under surveillance for previous stuff we're going to talk about, it probably would have worked just because it was so fucking ballsy.
Oh, I love these guys. Usually when I say that during an episode, it means that there's going to be some goofy dudes.
We get to take the opposite sides on this because I'm a Scotland Yard flying squad guy for this episode. You're taking the side of, and what do we even call these guys? What did...
They were known as the Gertie Gang.
The Gertie Gang.
And we'll talk about how they got that moniker. But these guys subscribe to something in life that I subscribe to. My favorite tool to use is a hammer. I'm a wreckage kind of guy. If you can't get it done with brute force and there has to be any sort of fine tuning, I'm probably not the guy. If you need somebody to swing a sledgehammer, I'll do that shit all day long.
These guys were blunt force over sophistication in almost every way, shape, and form. I want to get into this. And so as a reminder, guys, wherever you listen to your podcast, it's real easy for you to click that, that 5th star on there, that top review. Easy for you to do, but it means the world to us and it helps us, advance this podcast. You got anything else, buddy?
No, let's get to the heist.
Okay, where does this take place?
Yeah, we got to set the stage. December 31st, 1999, something called the Millennium Dome opens up in South London, right on the River Thames. And this was kind of it's an insane amount of money spent on this building. And now we're talking about the Millennium Dome, which was then converted into O2 Arena. They hold UFC events, boxing matches, concerts, everything that goes on over there.
If anyone saw the Pierce Brosnan James Bond, I think it was The World Is Not Enough, the one where they actually do on the River Thames, they do the speedboat chases, the opening scene.
Oh, yeah.
And he ends up, the guy tries to escape, fucking using a hot air balloon, I think. But not planned, not like these guys' level of sophistication. He hijacks a hot air balloon. Bond gets up there, it explodes, but he falls onto the roof of the Millennium Dome. And that's the only time I'd ever seen it.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's in, I think it's I love how London is all like divided up into these areas. So like
Almost like
Greenwich,
boroughs. This is a lot New York similar, kind of.
yeah. So Greenwich, southeast London, and it's out on this like little peninsula that basically kind of like the Thames kind of hairpins around it, surrounding it on like three sides.
And we keep bringing up the Thames because it's going to become very important. Speaking back about the Millennium Dome, this project cost £789 million, $1 billion in U.S. currency. Today, it would be worth £1.73 billion. It was a hell of a lot of money. This place was open for 1 year with this event to celebrate the Millennium, obviously the Millennium Dome. It had 14 different exhibits inside of it. They had 6.5 million visitors that showed up in that 1 year span.
It was a huge fucking flop. Like people lost, like government officials fucking lost their jobs for this because it cost so much taxpayer money.
Well, yeah, just to lay that out, for every person that walked into that building, it would have cost like, they would have had to have spent $120 just to break even on what the building cost was, not bringing in all the exhibits.
I don't even know how this got approved. Like, you're like, we're going to build this really expensive thing. Basically, it's an expo center.
Yeah.
Is what it is.
Yep.
And then we're just going to, because it ends up closing literally at the end of the next year.
Well, it was the Millennium. You can't, 2001, you can't keep it open.
I understand that, but you don't just like, oh, so I guess we're done using this insanely elaborate, huge building. And this thing was like themed, had so many weird little themes about it that coincided with like the years. So it had, what it basically looks like is a big white dome, but actually holding up the skin of the dome, you have these 12 basically spires, spires, like scaffolding, and they all then hold up all of the actual dome surface, like the dome skin. So 12 for each month of the year. I believe it was 360 meters around or across, so 365 days of the year. And then what was it about the 52?
52 feet high?
That's right.
Or 52 meters high.
52 meters high at the highest point in the middle to account for 1 week of year. So not only are you building this thing just strictly for this year of doing these expositions, which were basically, like Adam said, divided up into zones, human body. So think, what's the thing we just talked about when we were talking about Da Vinci? It's the Bodies in Motion exhibit.
It was, but this shit sounded so cool. Basically, you would walk through this exhibit. You were supposed to consider yourself as a red blood cell traveling through the body.
It better be fucking cool for what it costs.
For this sounding as big of a flop as it was, this place is 100% a place that I would have hung out at. Like, I would have definitely gone and seen this at least more than once. But the exhibit was just basically walking through, going through all the different systems of the body, crawling through different portions to show you like what the brain did, how your vascular system works, how your muscle systems work. It sounded pretty awesome. They also had the Millennium coin minting press to go through, and I didn't look too much deep into it, but I'm assuming this is like one of the roadside attractions that you used to like put a penny and then 50 cents in and it would smush it out and it would be like some special...
It would be the stamped, like, what do they call that? Commemorative penny from wherever you're at. The middle of it basically had this big dome show called like the Millennium Experience, kind of a Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah, this is where they hold the events now.
Yeah.
They had concerts. I mean, it seemed like a pretty big to-do.
And so in addition to that, you know, the Who Are We exhibit, body, faith, mind, what we do, work, rest, play, talk, money, journey, where we live, shared ground, living planet. They had all these things, but...
British Suckfest. This was all in the eyes of the British.
Yes, exactly. And so one of the things they had was this place called the Money Zone. And within the Money Zone, there was an exhibit that was being put on by De Beers. And fuck, I can't wait to dig into De Beers because that's fucking dirty as shit.
Yeah, blood diamonds.
So De Beers had this exhibit, and at this exhibit, because it's the Millennium Dome, it's the new millennium, you have to have the Millennium Star. And the Millennium Star diamond, when it was first found, it was a 777 carat uncut diamond. Now, where did these diamonds get discovered?
Africa. Was found in the former area known as Zaire, or the former country known as Zaire back then. It's the Congo now.
Yeah.
It was found back in 1990. I believe it was two guys that were digging, ended up pulling this diamond out, 777 carats, uncut. They got paid $700,000 for this diamond. This rough, uncut diamond.
Mm-hmm.
That is pennies compared to what this thing was worth.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is this is what's always fucking blown my mind about diamonds. They're only valuable because people say they're valuable. They are more valuable in the form of construction equipment and tooling and fucking precision lasers, all that kind of shit. They're more useful from a functional standpoint. Yet the most value we put on these things are fucking ornamental.
100% pressed carbon.
Yes. It's just fucking pressed. The same shit that fucking ends up in the fucking fire.
Ash, yeah.
Ends up getting compressed and whammo, we end up getting diamonds. And you know what? These two guys that found it, these were the two guys that were running all of the people working for them that ended up finding this.
They probably weren't the two guys that uncovered it.
Yeah.
So they get paid out. De Beers goes ahead and looks at this diamond. They bring it back up to the UK. Takes them 3 years to use lasers to cut this in this perfect pear-shaped 203 and change carat Millennium Star diamond. This thing had an estimated worth of 200 million pounds, which has only gone up. They only could insure it up to 100 million pounds.
Yeah.
So that's how rare this was.
It's a fucking rock.
Yeah.
The insurance company is like, yeah, it's a diamond, but I mean, it's like, you're not losing a fucking nuclear power station or like anything like that. It's a fucking rock.
Well, part of the reason that we hammer down on this so much is because we're going to talk about it later. If this thing goes missing or is stolen, where's it going to go?
Yeah.
Because a collector, a private collector could buy this and then just never be able to show anybody at the risk of this being found out that you're in possession of it. Because even if you bought it from a fence or you bought it from somebody else that stole it, you're getting arrested for owning this piece and knowing that.
And my thought on the matter is companies like De Beers that have that much money invested in this kind of stuff.
Fuck them.
Not only that, but you got to imagine the private security that these guys have working for them. The moment something like this, if it were to go missing and be stolen, I don't think it makes it past. It might get given to the fence, but at that point, they've got to have so many connections within that world that they're, and guess what? Something like that is going to cause ripples eventually, even if it's one person telling another person. De Beers gets that back, and they're going in there and assassinating someone and getting that shit back.
Well, yeah, and also you don't think De Beers has plants in that world just specifically for this
that are on their page? Yeah, exactly. It's fucking. It's got to be a crazy. Just, I don't even want to call it an industry. It's fucking an underworld or some shit like that. But getting back to the Millennium Star, so they decide that this is going to be the centerpiece of the, Millennium Money Zone display. So this is put into a case, which at night the entire exhibit would actually be locked in, is essentially a vault. During the day, the vault is open and people are able to go in and out. This is an expo center. You go buy your ticket, you can go into any of these places, and they have the diamond inside a display case, the glass of which and how it was constructed was supposed to withstand
up to 30 minutes of heavy blows from like any instrument of destruction.
Like even powered tools.
Yeah.
And everything like that. So this thing, by the time, if someone were to try to steal this, by the time they were breaking through the glass, they would already, response would already be there. It may be 10 minutes later.
Yeah. Not only that, to go along with this Millennium Diamond, you have 11 priceless blue diamonds around it. The Hope Diamond, the one that we have in the Smithsonian, is a blue diamond. So you have 11 of these surrounding it. I want to say that it was like over 400 million pounds for the entire display.
Yeah.
Excuse me, which, again, they set the price on all this shit, so that's just what it costs, I guess.
It's just fucking sparkly rocks, man.
So in order to get this, I want to say that the glass was 20 or 22 millimeters thick. And coming from America, I couldn't give you a gauge on what that is. I'm just going to say it's real thick glass. I'm going to say,
but can't be so thick that it obscures. Like that's the balance they have to have. They can't just make this thing to where you got to see this shit. Like that's the whole point of it being here. So now that you know where this is and kind of the stage in which it's going to be set.
Now that you know the score.
Now we got to take you back a little bit further and we got to introduce you like a. It's weird that I say this because it's in London and this is the guy that's actually doing the documentary. This is a fucking Guy Ritchie movie.
Yep.
And so we're going to take you back and we're going to do the snappy frame to frame introduction of like how these guys kind of like get together and how they end up taking on this heist.
There's also, excuse me, I'm assuming Chris and I are going to be like Madonna during this episode. We might just wake up in the middle of a sentence and bust into a British accent. Like, I don't know. We're just going to feel it out. It's going to flow where it needs to flow.
A lot of British names.
Yeah, a lot of British names, a lot of British turns of phrase. I had to look up what some of these things were. We're going to be talking about lorries.
I have it in parentheses.
Semis.
I love it. He got in the lorry.
Yeah, so we're going to be flashing in and out of our British accents. Accents are just fun when it's white on white crime. That works pretty good
English.
for me.
We can speak in whatever. It's like it's the same thing. Be like, howdy, y'all. It's English.
Yep.
Okay, we're taking you back to February of 2000. So we come to the little sleepy South London area of the Nine Elms, which probably really isn't a sleepy area. I think it's kind of an industrial area, and there's a
lot of traffic.
A lot of traffic in
that area. A lot of
area.
angry people too, it seems like.
And why do they call them did they call them armored vans?
Yeah, I'm assuming it's like an armored truck.
Like a Brinks truck.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah, that's how I see it. That's how they kind of like portrayed it and everything. So armored truck is, making it's doing its armored truck shit. It's making its pickup, its deliveries, and pulls down a street. It might have been Nine Elms, right?
Yeah.
So it pulls down the street, and as it's, moving through, all of a sudden, as they're passing, one of the guys notices that there's a lorry, which is basically a flatbed truck, more of like a transport truck, a little bit bigger than a regular pickup truck.
Not they're akin to a semi, not quite the same
but
size,
with a flatbed on it and everything. So it's got a whole bunch of like Christmas trees and everything like that. It's February. It's probably a bunch of dead trees that this thing's towing out. Doesn't really clock it that much.
It's August and there's just a dead Christmas tree truck sitting there. It is February, but just imagine like, if that's the cover, if it's July and it's like, why does that lorry have a bunch of Christmas trees on it? What is that doing there?
That's going to draw a little bit more attention, I think.
Yeah.
So as it's pulling down the street, just like in a fucking armed robbery, like in the town or anything, car pulls up in front of it, blocks one section. Another car pulls up behind it and blocks the other side of the street. Guys get out. They've got guns. And of course, the armored truck drivers are just like, okay, hit the alarm, call it in and everything. Let's just go ahead and lock the doors. We know this thing has bulletproof glass. We just need to wait for the cops to show up.
3 other semis in the area were used to block traffic away to try to keep people out of this area.
Yep.
So we're not talking about just like a small, unsophisticated operation. It will be blunt, but this seems like there's a lot of thought that goes into trying to clear an area out.
It's well timed that the location picked out is very well picked out. The execution is what is going to be lacking in this instance.
Well, the first one was just too much trust in the public.
Maybe not having a certain vehicle in a certain place where they can maybe keep a little bit better of an eye on it.
That too.
So this Christmas tree lorry, this thing actually has a giant spike welded to the frame that sticks out of the back, probably 2 feet, 3 feet?
And encased in concrete. So just all sorts of weight behind it.
Yeah. And this was covered up essentially either by a tarp or like by one of the fucking Christmas trees or something like that. And they're going to use this to basically back into the back of the armored truck as fast as it can go, puncture through the door. Maybe you can help me understand this. The hole that they were making in it, I mean, it was probably a solid. The spike was like a 4-prong spike.
Yeah.
And was probably maybe at the most a foot by a foot, probably smaller than that, I think. Are you going to reach in and try to unlock it? Like, what are you doing?
Broadhead arrow.
Huh?
When you fire a broadhead into something, it can't come back out without causing a massive amount of damage. So after they rammed it, they were going to pull back out and just rip the doors off.
Oh, gotcha. It was going in there to essentially stick with the barbs. It wasn't. Okay, my understanding was they were trying to like wedge the door open or something like that.
No, they were going to stab it and then they were going to throw it and drive and use all that force to pull those doors off.
Or at least damage it enough to where they could actually get in there. Okay, that makes more sense.
But there's an issue.
Well, they have taken enough time getting, surrounding the truck and everything like that, getting in position, that the dude that's actually supposed to be in the spike lorry gets out and is kind of like contributing with these guys. I'm assuming they were wearing ski masks, and like in the documentaries I saw, they were wearing ski masks. I don't think they would do that unless that was probably what it looked like.
Yeah, they had an issue because to get to the doors on the back of the armored car, there's a giant lift gate. And that lift gate's used if you're transporting gold or anything like that, so you don't throw out your back, you load the gold on, you drop it down.
Dolly, and then you...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They were concerned that punching through the lift gate on the way pulling out was going to really screw some things up.
Or speed-wise, because that lift gate is still thick metal. You're going to lose all your momentum, and it's not going to penetrate through both that and the door in the back of the armored van or armored car.
The thought is that you got to get the lift gate off to expose the doors. Guy driving the lorry with the spike on it jumps out. All the robbers are back there trying to pull the lift gate down, get it disengaged, anything like that. The guys
inside are at this point laughing. Like, what are okay, you're scared shitless because regardless if you're in a fucking safe box like that, you don't know what they're going to be doing. And so you probably do have a healthy dose of fear, but at the same time, to see them all back there, like Keystone Coppin trying to pull this thing down like the Three Stooges, it's got to be a little bit entertaining.
Until you look in the mirror and you see the spike and why they're doing it. Because at that point, if they can breach in there... You don't see the
spike. It's parked down the...
They had backed it up.
Oh, had they?
Yeah, they had gotten close enough. Not close enough to keep an eye on the truck.
Not close enough, apparently.
Yeah, close enough to kind of see what they were doing.
But it was blocking someone's driveway or blocking traffic. And so...
Early in the morning, somebody's trying to get to work.
I can't be late. I still got to swing by and get my fucking... sausage sandwich or whatever they
got to get my meat pie, got to get my tea.
My full English breakfast.
Yeah, I just had my first tea of the day. I'm going to get my breakfast tea, then I'll have a brunch tea, then a lunch tea.
So this guy can't get out. So this is how far the spike lorry is away. The guy apparently walks out, is looking around, doesn't notice this shit going on with the armored truck.
It had to have been dark. I don't know.
Maybe. But so he's like, okay, this lorry's running. No one here is attending it. I'm going to go take the keys out of it. He didn't move it. So how did he fucking get out? But the guy still takes the keys out of it because he's pissed.
Yep.
So he takes the keys. All of a sudden, I think they end up resolving.
They got the lift gate.
They got the lift gate down. They're like, fantastic. Back to the lorry. The guy runs back, gets in. It's off. He's looking for the keys. Can't find them. So their entire plan, which hinges on using this spike to penetrate the back door, they no longer have the ability to do that. All of a sudden, I don't know if they start hearing sirens, but they are keeping time because they do understand the response time of what's happening. They realize that they're screwed in this situation. So they end up blowing up all the vehicles that they had brought with them.
Smart. Cover up all your evidence.
Yep. Fire is the ultimate cleanser.
Yeah.
And they proceed because strategically, this location was close to a waterway or the river.
This was the Thames too.
This was the Thames as well. Yep. And they escape by inflatable speedboat, empty-handed in this situation.
But the most bad guy escape ever.
Oh, yeah.
You just run and jump into the speedboat and you're off in the water. Perfect crime.
At the same time, like, it's in its simplicity, it's perfect because you're like, well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cop cars around, but how often do you see a police boat going up and down the river?
No.
And then also, they can't follow us until they get down to a bridge. We could literally just go to the opposite bank to another waiting car and get out of here.
Yeah, or if we're passing under one bridge and they're expecting to get us at the next bridge, if we just pull off and fuck off and leave, they're going to be sitting there with their dicks in their hands waiting for us.
Yeah.
Like it makes total sense. The response time on water is never going to be the same on land.
And the only drawback in this scenario is the boat is much lighter than they wanted it to be.
Well, that and then the fact that out of the $10 million that was in the security car, they got none.
All right. So once the police end up coming in here to investigate, the department that actually handles kind of like the main robbery cases from Scotland Yard, and also, just in case anyone wasn't aware, like I wasn't aware, Scotland Yard is actually just the name for the London Metropolitan Police. The reason it's called Scotland Yard is because the original Metropolitan Police Station or headquarters was located the entrance to it, you had to go through something called the Scotland Yard, correct?
Great Scotland Yard Street.
The Great Scotland Yard Street. And so people just started referring to it by its location, Scotland Yard. Well, when they ended up having to move locations for the headquarters, the name stuck, and so that became New Scotland Yard. They moved again, that then became New Scotland Yard. So it's actually just the metro. I used to think, honestly, Scotland Yard was like in Scotland, but it was
100%.
also like a version of kind of like Interpol. So Scotland was the one that had to like handle all the crazy crime shit, like deducing and all that kind of stuff. Like Scotland Yard is on it. It just means the fucking cops are on it.
I thought Scotland Yard was like London was the one that got all the heat, so that was just where it always was.
Yeah.
Like Scotland doesn't seem like that much of a general crime country, but for some reason England does.
So this department within Scotland Yard called the Flying Squad ended up being led by Detective Superintendent John Shatford. Get your giggles out now.
Poop Chevy.
Yeah. So Shatford is in charge of this flying squad. They are basically the ones that specialized in like more of the larger like robberies, not your normal type shit, but like the larger like armed robberies, things like that.
A lot of connections to the underworld.
Yes. So they go to investigate this and basically find that these, vehicles that were exploded, it looks like a fucking war zone.
Yeah.
Is what it does. There's a bunch of burned out vehicles. They find the lorry, and on the spike, they find carved in or written on the bottom of it, Gertie. Gertie.
Maybe
An ex-wife.
Yeah, a British woman's name. Gertie feels pretty accurate.
Gertrude.
Big Gertie. For a bunch of guys that wanted to blow up all the evidence, for some reason, that seems so stupid to me.
I don't know. It's nondescript. Here's the thing, too. Based on what we're going to talk about next, it makes sense that maybe they're a little bit like what they would refer to over there as a bit cheeky.
Yeah.
I think it's to be a little bit cheeky.
Wankers. Bunch of wankers.
So you would think this thing went so poorly, you're not going to attempt this again.
I don't know, man. I feel like as poorly as it went, yes, but at the same time, like the plan was there. The thought was there.
Yeah.
The only reason that they were foiled and they end up
Not
finding
a bad
this
plan, poor execution.
Yeah. The only reason that they're foiled is they find out that some guy came and nicked the keys out of the lorry that was supposed to execute the plan. Like, if that's the only impediment, they might try it again. There's a lot of armored cars that travel all over London every day.
Do you think this is one of those situations where after the heat from this had died down a little bit and everything, there wasn't like a constant like patrol on this street, all the evidence had been cleared up? Some of them revisited that area driving by being like, who could have taken these motherfucking keys? Like just looking at the houses and finding out like which one was parked close enough to the lorry and just being tempted. Because of course you couldn't do anything to the person.
Well, you go door to door, maybe ask them a couple questions.
Yeah, but like
you're there for insurance purposes.
Yeah, something like that. I just wonder if anything might have happened to that person.
Maybe he's only got 8 fingers today.
Something like that.
Well, like you say, there's a 50-50 chance they strike again. Maybe they don't strike again. We have to wait till July 7th, 2000. There's a second security van in Kent that is carrying 9 million pounds this time. So 10 million pounds, maybe they thought that I don't know. It was just another one that they were going to hit.
And I think where they were a little bit smarter this time. So instead of being in, South London, where you got a lot of traffic and everything, you're also in London. So you are, going to be under the jurisdiction, probably having more of a police presence for the Metropolitan Police.
Yeah.
They decided to take this one to Aylesford, which is in Kent. Population is only like 10,600, I think. So you're going a little bit smaller, but at the same time, that doesn't change the fact that there's still these armored trucks that are going here.
Yeah.
Also, the location they're picking, what else is it close to?
A river.
Got to be close to a river. It worked so well the first time. Nothing wrong with the escape. It was flawless.
Yeah, they all got away.
You stick with what works. And so what ends up happening is they pull it off in the same manner. They end up getting the spike into position and actually ramming the back of it. And I want to say that the spike penetrates, but it like doesn't go in far enough to actually like grip the door. Mm-hmm. So they pull out and it just leaves a big hole. So they're going to have to take another go at it to try to get this thing in. Well, random occurrence. just a cop out on patrol, not someone responding to anything like this, ends up just turning down the street and sees what's going on.
What's the luck?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you saw this. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. Do you know how they actually stopped this second armored car? They pulled up with a BMW in front of it and got out of the car, and they had strapped fake bombs around the vehicle to stop them.
Mm-hmm.
You remember what they used to fake the bombs?
They used steak and kidney pies.
Yep.
So
rigged with lights.
So steak and kidney. Think of it in the same way that I'm trying to think of an American thing that we would get for the container, like Jiffy Pop.
Yes.
How Jiffy Pop essentially has that foil thing that goes around it, the same way that they bend the foil around your Chipotle when you get it. So basically, it's a steak and kidney pie that has that kind of pinched metal around the top. They just spray painted them green and literally strapped some lights to them, and they're like, "These are fucking explosive devices." And they're like, "Oh shit." Well, steak and kidney pie bombs notwithstanding in this situation, cop ends up pulling up, which reminds me of a scene directly from The Town.
Yes.
They end up pulling up and they see it, and all of a sudden, as they're either driving by or pulling up, they turn over and there's a cop just sitting there, and all of them are sitting there in like the nun masks, and you can see them holding their guns. And the cop looks at him for a second. They all turn and look at him, and he just literally looks back down and just stares straight ahead. And they just fucking he's like, "I didn't see anything." This cop, however, probably can't get the fuck out. As soon as they start opening fire on him, which they actually do, he probably can't get out of there fast enough.
Yeah, and I'd like to think that maybe these things don't happen as often in this part of town, so maybe they were more willing to give a fight.
The sleepy area of Aylesford? Oh, shit, like this never goes down in Aylesford.
Shots fired in Aylesford.
Yeah.
Both directions. This is surprising to me, because I have never really thought of England as a gun place, but again, the underworld, these things are going to get passed through. It's just, this was such a different time. And Chris and I kind of talked about this before the episode. Vehicles blowing up around an armored car, vehicles blowing up on the street intentionally, you would probably start to lean towards the thought of domestic terrorism.
That's like if it happened that's like Department of Homeland Security shit, like in the United States, and whoever handles that over in Great Britain. But post 9/11, domestic terrorism, that became a word. That became a phrase.
The London tube bombings, or I guess that was still terrorism, not domestic terrorism. But that's where also we have to get through this, is domestic terrorism is just different from the blanket term of terrorism.
Yeah, exactly.
Like homegrown terrorism,
it's
insinuates
the people that look like you around you is who it is. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, Oklahoma City bombing, like Chris mentioned before the episode, domestic terrorism. So this might not have even been a real like thought in their minds. I'm sure terrorism happened over there. I know there was something before the two bombings that had to have happened. But at the same time, I don't think we had a real good grasp in 2000, pre 9/11, pre all this other stuff of what domestic terrorism could be.
Yeah, and I think looking at it from the perspective of like the Metropolitan Police, they came in here and they were like blown up vehicles, but we can clearly see that they were after the armored car.
They had a plan.
Yeah, exactly.
Something.
There was a purpose and a reason why the vehicles were torched or blown up. I don't even know if the cop fired back.
They did.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, there was an exchange of gunfire.
Okay. So because of this exchange of gunfire, they have to cancel the plan again. And surprise, surprise, they successfully escape by inflatable speedboat.
What did they not successfully do this time?
They did not successfully torch the vehicles. And this is going to happen when essentially you're forced to leave, because as soon as the firefight pops off, anyone in the vicinity that can hear that's law enforcement is going to be rushing to that area. And of course, as soon as that guy gets on the radio that there's a robbery, everyone is heading directly toward you. So at that point, they're kind of out of the option of hiding the evidence. The kind of evidence that was hidden during the first attempt.
They didn't try to blow up the meat pie bombs. They tried to blow up the real bombs they put inside of them.
Exactly. Well, written on this spike was Gertie 2, and then underneath that was persistent, aren't we? So this is where I get into the idea of like, now they're just kind of fucking with the cops.
Yeah.
I think but what this also does, I don't think they, and in the way they're like, we're fucking with you. You didn't catch us again this time. They're now completely tying themselves without deniability to that first robbery. So I know you're probably splitting hairs in regards to one armored truck robbery or two, but at the same time, to be like, thank you for writing the name on that, because that's what allows us to also charge you with this other robbery where you torched all these vehicles.
Here's the thing. After the first one gets so close, you named it Gertie, and it doesn't succeed.
It wasn't Gertie's fault.
But you have to have the most irrational confidence or just no really understanding of how there was a chance for something else to go wrong again. Because if you write persistent, aren't we, and you fail a second time, you're just persistent at fucking up and failing.
No, these guys aren't road scholars.
No, certainly not.
When we start actually naming names and kind of giving the backstory, it's going to make sense because these guys obviously have a previous relation with the police. And yeah, the attitude of just fucking with them. But what's funny is they don't write this after they fail and have to end up running.
Yeah.
They wrote this with the intention of successfully pulling off this $8 million or 8 million pound robbery, getting the fuck out of there, and then like leaving this for the cops and been like, see, it pays off, persistence. It's like, you just fucked up again.
Yeah. Maybe we put the cart before the horses. Maybe you should have scribed it in after you successfully did this. Mm-hmm. Like, leave yourself 30 seconds to do this. It just blows me away.
So, Flying Squad, of course, is going to be on this one as well. They start connecting the dots. It's not hard to connect the Gerties in this situation. And also, how many different crews are using the fucking spike strapped to the back of a lorry?
No.
That's the calling card.
The other, goddamn, dude, this cough is going to kill me. The other thing is, if you can't destroy the vehicles, you leave behind evidence that maybe could be tied to if these vehicles were stolen, if they were turned in anywhere. Mm-hmm. And it turns out in running these vehicles that they were able to track a couple of them back to a place called Tong Farm.
I think there was some type of joint, investigation between like Kent and also like the Kent law enforcement and also the Flying Squad.
Yeah.
I want to say they had an officer that had seen like in like one of the newspaper photos mm-hmm. and everything. And he's like, I've seen that truck before actually. And, if you're just, you're a cop, you live out in the suburbs or anything like that, you might be out for a Sunday drive, you might pass a farm or something like that. Something might stand out to you. And if you're trying to recall what it is, he's like, I've actually seen that truck before. I think I've seen it out this place, like you said, Tong Farms. So now they have a location to where they're trying to tie this stuff back to. And this place goes under hardcore surveillance. I'm talking people in the woods outside this farm at all times with binoculars, writing down the coming and goings of whoever is moving in here, any equipment moving in here, because they believe that they've found their base of operations for the Gertie gang.
Well, it kind of stands to reason. Tong Farm was owned by the Wenham family. Lee Wenham lived there. He was a local scrap dealer. Stolen cars more than likely usually end up in a chop shop or a scrap dealer because that's where they're going to get the most amount of money for.
Who's also going to have the equipment and the know-how in order to go ahead and mount something like this to the chassis of a car? Because scrap dealers aren't just like, oh, you brought me a car, okay, here, and I'm just pushing the car for someone else. They tear it down and break it down to its components in order mm-hmm. to go ahead and, maximize their profits and everything like that. So you're going to have some fucking tools in order to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, he's known as a low-level criminal. July, this same month, the Flying Squad sends off what are known as crop officers to watch this farm. As Chris said, they were everywhere. They had telescopes. They had all the listening devices. August 2nd, they pick up a white van and something called a JBC digger. Basically,
for us in the States, it's a backhoe with a bucket on the front.
Yes, just a piece of heavy machinery.
Earth mover.
I mean, could you say a JCB digger could be used at a farm? Yes, absolutely.
Oh, 100%. But what's weird about it is just the timing in which it coincides here, because once they track this back to the farm, they know that, Lee Wenham is involved in this because this is where the truck is. But all of a sudden, over the course of this investigation, more people start to actually show up at the farm. They find this guy named Raymond Betson and William Cockram end up showing up one day to meet with Wenham. And these guys are no strangers to the Flying Squad or to Scotland Yard. Raymond Betson is a career criminal, and William Cochran is basically also a career criminal and kind of known as Betson's like number two.
The boys.
Yeah.
Partners in PICs. Literally.
They're exactly that. Also during this time, a little bit later, they find a guy named Terry Millman.
This was the man that showed up in the white van the same day that the JCB digger showed up.
Yep, exactly. And Terry Millman was, again, a career criminal, but this guy also had a history of armed robbery. So all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, like, okay, this is all starting to make sense now. They got their little crew together. And like Adam was saying, basically you have this series of events where all of a sudden a boat shows up.
Well, before the boat shows up, we got to point this out because we got to put the intelligence microscope on, Terry Millman. They don't know who's Terry Millman to begin with. They put just a marked name. He is the target. Follow him around, follow him into town. One night, old Terry gets a little too drunk. As he's driving home, he ends up pulling off the side of the road and running his car into a business. When he gets arrested, they identify him. They pull his prints. They know exactly who he is. And there's really not anything else he's good for being locked up. I mean, if you need him to run some bait, maybe you just release him on bail.
Oh, yeah, because at this point, they already knew that he was in, had this relationship or had this arrangement with Wenham, Betson, and Cockram. And so now they're just like, all we need to do is pretty much just confirm who this guy is and bring him in.
Yeah.
We're already surveilling him. We know what he's doing. We just have to wait for him to fuck up. And then we let him go. But at that point, we know who he is, and we're just going to continue with the surveillance.
At no point did Millman probably ever go back and be like, "Oi, I ran into the police.
Nope.
They arrested me."
I didn't mention a peep out of it. And at no point did these guys know that from a very early point in this, again, we're sitting in July, that from an early point in this, they are under like heavy surveillance, which, fuck, that sounds fun.
Yeah, it does. It sounds kind of shitty in the countryside in London because they said it just rained all the time.
Maybe that guy, the people that had to sit out there with the scopes and the binoculars and take all that down. I want to be the guy back that they're sending all of the information and like put the fucking pieces together. And I'm like Charlie doing all the twine on the pictures and tying it up. Yeah.
They also had a kind of I don't really know what he would be. These guys all kind of had these criminal histories. His name was Aldo Sirocci. Sirocci was a low-level criminal, too, had never really pulled anything off. Out of all of them, they said that Cockram and Betson were probably the two best at what they did. They had been suspects in a lot of different crimes. Terry Millman had actually done like a 13-year stretch before that. So he was known to the police kind of already, but until they got the positive ID and put two and two together, they didn't see it. There's a guy named James Hurley that was he's a conspirator, doesn't really play a big part in this. He actually flees, I believe it was the day before the robbery, down to Spain, and there's a manhunt. They come down and pick him up. But regardless, everybody here isn't a jewel thief. They're not world famous robbers.
No.
They're low level criminals. They were
Not a
cigarette. No. They were cigarette smugglers before this. Like they had jobs that were just not of this same style.
Aldo Ciarocci, he was also like a failed property developer. And he had the penchant for the finer things in life. And so I think he was kind of desperate at this point. He's like, I guess I can make some money off of this. Not knowing, of course, what the hell he's doing.
Well, we don't know what they're going to try. We have these two attempts. These two attempts don't work. None of these guys have been paid for any of this shit. But what they do...
doo-doo.
Well, Shatford doo-doo.
Okay, there you go.
What Shatford does is he goes ahead and he looks at Millman's prints, and they go back to the scene of the second unexploded vehicles, and they find Millman's prints inside of one of the cars. So now you can for sure match Millman there.
Yeah.
And
You already know, but at this point, you're needing to put like the hard evidence into place to lock up your case. And at this point, the thought of these guys trying to pull off and if this would have been pulled off, it would have been the largest theft in like monetarily in British history up to this point, right?
yeah, I believe Antwerp will be bigger, but they're not in.
Well, had this been successful.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, spoiler alert. But that's part of the fun of it. So they have no inkling that they're going to try to go this big. They still think that this is going to turn into just a simple repeat of what's been going on. Yeah. Maybe they'll get a little bit further this time, but now that they've got them under surveillance, they'll basically probably allow them to try to stop the armored vehicle and then just swarm in. They'll have, people following them and everything like that.
Well, and their antennas do go up because, as you mentioned earlier, Terry Millman's white van goes ahead and pulls a white speedboat onto Tong Farm property.
Everything's coming together. They got the escape. And this one is not an inflatable speedboat. They're actually upgrading. They're like, guys, the speedboat's been working out, but I think we could probably just actually splurge for like a regular speedboat.
Let's try to legitimize this a little bit.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. If we don't feel like, an inflatable speedboat, come on, that doesn't feel legit. How are we supposed to feel and have the confidence that we can pull something like this off?
This is a look good, feel good, steal good kind of scenario.
Now we come to my favorite part. And my favorite part is when they eventually find out what these guys are planning. And again, all these guys are under surveillance. So comes to be known that Lee Wenham is going to take his girlfriend and either his kid or her kid.
He had already gone once.
He had already gone once by himself?
Yes.
Okay.
Because that was the day that he purchased the family ticket for the return.
That's right. They find out he pays a family ticket. They're like, what did he pay $58 for? And they're like, the only thing that is $58 would be a ticket to the Millennium Dome.
And obviously that's suspicious, right? Because this Millennium Dome is the most laughable shit ever in England over there. Why would somebody go to see it twice?
The story goes that they're talking about him going to the Millennium Dome. And because he's taking his wife and kid,
his girlfriend. He's not that legitimate.
His girlfriend.
He might have had a wife too.
They're probably looking at this like, we're tailing him because we're doing this to everybody. But to them, this is not like, they're like, this is just where he's going. So while he's there, special attention is being paid to the money zone and to the De Beers exhibit specifically. I think he goes in it 3 separate times. And so they're doing this, Flying Squad is doing this little strategy session and they're trying to figure out kind of how to connect the dots. And supposedly some guy that had recently been to the Millennium Dome and like gone through the exhibits, he kind of chimes in from the back and like, maybe they're after the Millennium Star. Just kind of probably joking around because it's so fucking audacious for these guys to go after this fucking 200 million pound diamond.
Big score.
In the middle of the Millennium Dome.
Yeah.
At this point, that to them is probably like, that's a ridiculous prospect. But now they're starting to think like, oh shit, like what if?
Well, it's like you said, you attack an armored car, you're going to have a police response. You steal from De Beers, you have to deal with private De Beers security that does shit off the books.
They don't know that.
You got to think about it though. From a police standpoint, you got to be like, they wouldn't be that dumb. From a police
standpoint, probably, but from the
not the
standpoint,
robbers.
they're just fucking diamond people.
No, never crossed their mind. They thought it was going to be a bunch of guys with their pinkies up chasing them. Not a chance.
And so kind of eventually over the course of now them plugging in the Flying Squad, plugging someone into security at the Millennium Dome, like kind of in the CCTV room so he's able to kind of watch everything. I think they do it under the guise of trying to keep like drug dealers. It's a drug sting or something like that. They think people are trying to ply the trade inside the Millennium Dome. They're like, this is just for us to keep this place secure for you guys and keep it clean. They're like, oh, it's a family place, of course. Go ahead and do this.
Well, God damn it. Also, geographically, what did you say surrounds the Millennium Dome?
Well, that's what Shafford said he was looking at when he was trying to kind of piece it together. He's like, it's ridiculous. And then all of a sudden he looks at like a top-down view of the Millennium Dome. And it's surrounded on 3 sides by the River Thames. And he's like, they just got a new boat. Okay, I think this, and they're visiting the thing. And they start visiting not like, it's not Wellman going with his family. You end up getting like Cockrum and Betson
Oh, yeah.
and them all kind of visiting, and of course paying special attention to this area. You get the time when Wenham goes, he's not just looking at the exhibit. He's walking around the outside of the Millennium Dome and looking at gates and everything. There's an area that you can kind of walk down by where the River Thames is. He's walking down there and kind of looking around, and they have footage of him kind of like scoping out the shore, and you could tell he's casing the place.
Yeah, pretty obviously. As we were talking about earlier, this vault that it's in, 22 millimeter thick glass cases, all of this is being filmed.
Yeah.
Now, to film something nowadays, you pull out your phone, you hit record, it happens. To film back then in 2000, it's not a small procedure.
No. And it's not the kind of footage that we would have now where everything's digital. Because you can go on and, there's documentaries on this, not the one coming out on Netflix, but there's just some smaller ones like back when they made these when this happened. But they have like the CCTV footage. You can witness what's going on the inside of this, but it's more of that because it's being saved to tape, I think.
Yeah.
It's more of that it skips every second or so. So it's only capturing like snippets. You're seeing stuff in a flip book sense almost.
It's like watching a gas station robbery happen in the Millennium Dome.
Or trying to watch porn like in like the early 2000s with a dial-up connection where it would freeze up and it would kind of like scramble and pixelate and everything.
Buffer.
Only the real ones will understand that. So all of a sudden, this stuff is kind of starting to come together. They notice that recognizing the pattern of these guys, they're only showing up to kind of case this place at certain times.
Different days.
Different days. It's not like they're coming in like twice a week or doing anything like that. There's some distance between the days. And of course, they're investigating and finding out any connections, and come to find out the days that they're visiting are the days in which the Thames is high tide, because apparently the Thames is extremely affected by like the tidal.
I had no idea.
I had no idea either, but high enough to the point where on low tide you can't get access up to certain points. So being that you're trying to escape by speedboat, you have to be able to get up very close for them to also pile into and everything and then get out of there.
Yeah, it's to me that feels like a pretty impressive leap to figure that out.
Yeah.
Like to look at something and be like, oh, this robbery is going to be affected by the tides. I guess they understood the boat and everything else. And they saw Wenham looking at the river and then Cockrum and Betson both looking at the river. But to be like, tide chart, that's pretty smart.
I wonder if it kind of goes down to, now you got me doing it. A process of elimination type thing.
Yeah.
Like you're looking at it and you're like, okay, someone makes sense of is this phases of the moon? Are they only showing up on the full moon? And someone looks at it just, because they're looking for any and all possible situations. They're like, weirdly enough, actually, there is like a full, because, the moon affects the tides and everything like that. So all of a sudden they're like, okay, why would they be showing up on this? And they're like, doesn't the Thames like react to like the tides and everything? Like, doesn't it have like a pretty significant high and low tide? And they're like, holy shit, that's the connection. I mean, you're an investor. Like, think of if you proposed this to us and we smoked. We're eventually going to reach a point when we're looking at this calendar of just coming up with weird sounding shit of being like, I don't know, it's weird, man. Like, weirdos always come out on the full moon. Like, what does the moon do? It affects the tides. What if it affects the river? And all of a sudden it comes together.
What is it about these days?
The flying squad has a room where two dudes just get stoned and they give them the evidence and like, make sense of this.
The highest flyers.
That's what it is.
Well, you have a squad. You have a flying squad. You have a group of robbers. You have a mark. How are you going to take that? You got to start an operation, right?
You do.
And what is that operation?
Operation Magician. Which...
So fucking stupid.
I fucking love it. I know we've discussed some pretty bad operational names like during like World War II episodes and some pretty badass operational names. Operation Magician to me is cool.
Is this like a now you see it, now you don't type deal?
Yes, yes. This is a
sleight of hand?
Chris Angel mind freak type magician. I think what you're thinking is shitty birthday magician. Guy trying to pull out like the handkerchiefs out of his sleeve. Yeah, I think this is more of your mainstream Vegas Strip magician.
Maybe not Operation Diamond?
2 on the nose.
Operation Millennium.
2 on the nose.
Operation Stop the Speedboat. Hey.
If the operation name gets out, it's kind of tells you exactly what the operation is. It's got to be a little vague, I think.
I guess this is just, it's so silly. September 1st. Oh, but this isn't the modus operandi. They've never tracked the Gertie gang into breaking into a building to steal something.
It's a big leap.
Yeah.
Between trying to spike through the back door of an armored truck to trying to steal, which at the time it might still be the world's most valuable cut diamond.
Quite possibly. Yeah. It changes the way that they looked at it. And they thought, well, maybe there's somebody on the inside. Maybe there's somebody tracking this. They have to have some sort of help somewhere. But also, the higher likelihood is that if they do have someone on the inside, they know when this thing gets moving. They know the transit schedule of this diamond collection.
When you're trying to think about it logically, you're like, what? Okay, they have failed these last two. And one of them... They
got closer the second time, though.
They did get closer, but here's the thing. There are so many factors that can go wrong with this stuff, but they have failed twice. And for them to say, so they're just going to try to, like, steal this thing. You have to make the connection in your head and be like, something's giving them the confidence to know they even have a remote shot at pulling this off. What would give you that kind of confidence? Well, you'd have to have someone with inside information. You'd have to have someone that was able to provide you with intel about what happens after hours. Like, how does the vault, because at this point, they also are thinking, okay, well, if they're going to try to steal this thing, it doesn't mean they're trying to steal this thing here during the day when they're coming to visit it. They could be attempting to break into this place at night, in which case this thing is sealed up like a vault. Or maybe they're just actually casing the diamond itself, and they know that this is here, and if they have an inside man, maybe they know if this thing's ever going to be moved or anything like that, and that's exactly what ends up happening. Not the inside man, but all of a sudden, De Beers is like, oh, by the way, we're actually taking the Millennium Star. We're taking that to Japan for 2 weeks, or like 15 days or 2 weeks. So in the meantime, we're going to replace it with essentially a replica. And we're
of them. The blues, the blue Millennium, well. Everything was a replica. And they were that good that they were confident enough to try to show off the beauty of their work, that their replicas were so nice that they could put them on display.
Okay, we're sitting in September, right?
Yes.
Millennium Dome's not doing too hot. Yeah. They can see the writing on the wall at this point, and I think they're thinking to themselves, listen, we've had this thing here for 9 months already. All the people that are going to be able to come in here and even have a remote chance at telling if this thing is a CZ or if it's the real diamond, they've already come and gone. There's going to be 12 people coming in here over the next 14 days. Listen, I think we're okay. No, and especially when it's behind, oh yeah, it looks like that because it's behind the security glass, but it's still so beautiful, right?
Put the main on the lab, we'll throw them in the lion's pit, nobody will know the difference.
So De Beers is going to be transporting this back to their headquarters in another portion of London to then be transferred to Japan. Well, at this point, Shafford is like, this is it. This is when they're going to actually do it. They can't break in to the vault. They can't break into the Millennium Dome. Possible. If they're going to do it, this fits more their MO. This is essentially going to be transported in an armored truck. This is what they're doing. And so
they got 7 miles to hit this thing.
Exactly.
And we go under the river, so we go in a tunnel and have no communication.
Yep. And he's like, I think that's the point in which if they're going to do it, that's where they're going to hit it. So Operation Magician, there's let's say Operation Magician 1 or -A.
The ambush operation.
Yes. Part of this is going to be gathering between 200 and 300 officers, not all from the flying squad because it's not that big, but through surveillance, also having tails, having people positioned around the Millennium Dome for when it's leaving because they don't know, they think they know where it's going to get hit in this tunnel, but it could get hit anywhere along this route. So they've got people positioned along the entire route trying to, pen this thing in when it does happen.
We got 8 unmarked cars. We have people that are sitting on rooftops with telescopes watching everything.
I think there was a guy that was on the tallest building in London at that point and was able to almost view the entire route.
We got high-speed boats on the water just in case they use that boat to escape.
I got a helicopter a little bit of a distance away.
We spent so much money that they brought in RAF helicopters, not even private helicopters, military helicopters to do this.
Well, I don't know if the flying squad has access to that many air assets, despite the name.
They got the guy that gives the traffic out of the helicopter every day. They can get that guy. They have to have a traffic copter.
Mitch Stevenson with Channel 5 News.
Yeah.
The traffic update. Regardless, they have a shit ton of people and it's costing them a lot of money to do this. So they are, Shafford is white knuckling this thing the entire way of the operation. He's convinced that this is where they're going to end up catching these guys. And it ends up leaving the Millennium Dome, travels through the tunnel, gets back to De Beers, gets behind the gates of De Beers. Nothing happens.
I believe they said it was a 19-minute journey.
Yeah.
Not very far, but far enough for stuff to go wrong.
Your ass being that tight for 19 minutes has got to be a good workout.
Could have made a diamond.
Exactly.
He could have crafted his own diamond.
Yeah, exactly. So at this point, Shafford is like, I'm getting fired. Like there was a lot. I think they said it was over 150,000 pounds that this part of the operation
I
cost.
bet it was more than that.
Well, they're only disclosing that because imagine if they tried to disclose how much it really costs of taxpayer money.
That was the bill for the boats and the unmarked cars.
So Shafford is like, I'm getting fired. This has tanked my career. I thought I had this thing figured out. And he's back at the office the same day. And all of a sudden he gets a phone call, and it's the dude that they planted inside the Millennium Dome in the CCTV room doing surveillance. And he's like, you're not going to believe this, but Betson and Cochran are here. And
showed up to film the diamonds.
And they showed up to film the diamonds.
Or the dupes.
Yeah, the dupes, exactly. Or, they're filming everything. It's a trip out to the Millennium Dome. So they go in there, they're filming. They have no idea that these things have just been swapped out, which completely blows the thought process of them thinking they had a man on the inside. So all of a sudden, this thing is back on. It was never the plan to knock this thing over when it was in transit because they had no idea it was ever going to be in transit.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, Shafford, he gets to stay in the seat to go ahead and kind of see Operation Magician through. And now it's to the point where they're like, okay, now it's back to the point, because the speedboat wouldn't have been relevant had they knocked it over in the tunnel or along the way. It probably would have been too far away. So now it's back to like, this is why the speedboat and them checking the river and all that shit is now so important, is because this has been the plan all along, is to actually try to rob this thing. But now we have to figure out, okay, now that they're going to rob it here, when are they going to do it? Is it going to be at night when this thing is sealed up in a vault? Is it going to be during the daytime when this thing is the most exposed?
That is interesting to think, because if the boat was going to play a factor, it was probably going to had to have happened around either the choke point of leaving the tunnel or going into the tunnel, because that was the closest way to get to the river, because the tunnel went under the river.
Oh, that's true. So I guess it could have happened, and then they could have tried to, because again, these guys have no idea. It's not like they know that the cops are onto them. Yeah. So they have to plan this extra well. They're just like, they have no idea. This is going to be a shock to everybody. No one's going to suspect this. We just need the time to get to maybe either into the tunnel, or we're doing it like they had planned to actually do this, and then they had to back out on it. So it's kind of irrelevant. True. Okay, now we're going to actually get into the lead up to what's actually going to go down for the heist. But before that, let's take a bathroom break.
Okay.
Well, hey there, all you sexy historians. How you guys doing?
It is time for
socials.
Where can they find us on Instagram?
If they want to follow us, they can find us at Historically High Pod on Instagram.
That goes the same for Threads as well. You can also find us on Twitter.
Tell them about Twitter.
Historically High. That's Historically HI on Twitter.
And if you want to email any of your comments or suggestions, where can they find us at, Adam?
At Historically High Podcast at gmail.com.
Gmail. All right, and back to the show. All right, the Diamonds went to Tokyo. Now they're back. And there is a little bit of confusion on if the diamonds, because the flying squad has, of course, lit De Beers.
Yeah.
After they let De Beers know essentially as soon as it was a target. And the head of security for De Beers was just like, this thing is completely protected. We're fine. Like, we're not too concerned about it.
30 minutes of constant pounding. Nobody's going to be able to get to these
and that's
things.
just the case that's there for the public.
Yeah.
Like, this thing's going to also be in a vault. So they didn't have a lot of belief that this thing would be pulled off, but they still knew that they were going to attempt it. Just because De Beers didn't think they could do it didn't mean the fucking Gertie gang didn't think they could.
Hundreds of millions of dollars of precious stones that could be injured in any sort of issue.
So when they got back, do you think the real ones were swapped back in, or because this whole thing was going down, they were never swapped back in at any point, right?
Not a chance.
Okay. Because they said, like, once they got back, they were swapped in. But the whole point is they were informed of this by the flying squad before because they knew about the tails and, like, basically the convoy and everything that was going to accompany it back to headquarters when it had to go to Tokyo.
Well, yeah, and if you spent that much money making sure it got to the De Beers company, why would you spend that much money taking it back from De Beers to the Millennium Dome?
I don't think they had people complaining and being like, this diamond is
nobody
fake.
called it out.
Yeah, so yeah, what's
cared.
the incentive of actually moving it back there?
Like you say, we're talking about mid-September at this point. What the shit? Who cares?
So we come to September 9th, and of course these guys are still under surveillance, and a couple of them go out to actually do a little runabout in the speedboat, make sure this thing's working. And wouldn't you know it, speedboat issues. Nothing will ruin a good weekend of tubing like speedboat issues and a good heist. So can't have that. So they're like, ooh, okay, well, what's going on here? These guys are having problems. They don't really know the dates still. They know when the high tide dates are, but they don't know when they're going to try to do this. But they
Number
know
of high tide dates.
Yeah, exactly. So, but they know they're prepping for it. We come to October 6th, and all of a sudden, I feel like when we keep saying JCB, we heard it so much in the research that to us, we're just like, oh, it's just a backhoe with a scoop on the front.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a backhoe. So JCB, it's just the company it's a British company that actually makes these things. They call them JCBs.
And hilariously enough, what'd you find out about JCB before the episode?
JCB leaned into this shit so hard, like a company should. And so JCB actually, on their website, they have a section that is about the Millennium Diamond heist, and like their backhoes like rolling it and everything. They have a like ad, and I hope they ran this thing as a JCB ad, but it actually has a picture of the model that they used, and it says the only thing that worked to plan as part of this heist.
I'm not a bumper sticker guy, but if I lived over in London and had a car, I would absolutely throw that bumper sticker on the back.
It's perfect marketing.
Hilarious.
So the JCB moves from Tong Farms and moves down a couple miles away from the Millennium Dome into like an old abandoned coal yard, right?
Yeah.
And there's footage of them actually moving it. They literally just have this backhoe like rocking down the freeway with a white van following with his hazards on, and then it just ends up pulling into this abandoned coal field and just parks.
What do you do? I mean, what?
I don't know. So now they're like, okay, this has got to be like the forward command base for the Gertie gang. This is where they're going to actually launch this thing from.
Yeah, it turns out we're not using a lawyer with a spike on the back. We're using the JBC Earth Mover.
They've upgraded. So October 10th rolls around. It turns out that the speedboat issues were a little more severe than they thought, because Terry Milner goes out and I think Millman goes out and buys a new speedboat. I think they said he spent like 2,000 pounds cash or something like that, and ends up pulling away with a brand new fancy, might have been a red racing stripe speedboat.
Terry Millman didn't buy a new boat.
Oh, that's right. Terry Diamond bought that boat.
This shithead signed the bill of sale, Terry Diamond. Why are you doing that?
Can't make that shit up, man.
No, because if you successfully get away from this, or get away with this, they're going to go back and look for any speedboats that had been recently purchased.
Yeah, but it's Terry Diamond. It's not Terry Millman.
You know that.
And it was cash.
Yeah, I guess. It's just insane. You gotta imagine,
had this thing been pulled off and they had to track it back to that and they saw that, that's a slap in the face. They're like, fucking Terry Diamond, are you kidding me? I like the move. This is when I'm jumping over from the flying squad to agree with this move. Terry Diamond is perfect.
They might as well have thrown Gertie. He should have signed it Terry Gertie.
Can we get a spike on the boat or on the front of the? I know we don't need to use it, but can we get a spike incorporated somewhere on
For old
this
time's
JCB?
sake.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of our calling card, like the Wet Bandits.
This is
Gertie. Do you? Oh shit! I never looked into it. Do you think that they had anywhere written on the backhoe, Gertie 3?
It had to have been somewhere.
Somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't screw that up twice to not do it a third time.
Yeah, I think you gotta do that. So they got the new boat. They're good to go. During this time, they're still kind of making little like surveillance runs and checking the river and doing all that kind of stuff. And it falls down to everything building up to November 6th. November 6th is the first day of this high tide period. And early on that day, this is the day they thought it was going down. So early on that day, a bunch of like moving trucks for like furniture and stuff like that, box stands basically, pull into the Millennium Dome really early in case the guys from the gang are actually watching for any type of police presence, pull like into like the underground parking and unload roughly like 100 to I think 200 both flying squad and also just like Scotland Yard officers to enter the dome. And some are dressed as like janitorial staff and actually have their like submachine guns in like the bins, like the trash cans that they're pushing around. Some of them are disguised as tour guides. They built a false wall next to the money zone that would basically just be behind it. I think they said they had like 40 to 60 officers that were just behind this false wall. They had this thing locked up fucking tight. They were ready to go.
Well, and the other thing too is just because you didn't snuff out an inside man before doesn't mean you can just load this place up with a bunch of security and just say, hey, there's going to be a diamond heist. Everybody's going to freak out about that.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to hide everybody. But what do you think when you see all of these hundreds of people show up? It's like, wow, we have 100 janitors here today.
It's not. They weren't 100 janitors.
But if you have 6 new tour guides that day, you're like, wait a second, it's November. This place is about to get closed down. What's with all the new tour guides?
Had someone gone in first, and taken a look at the situation, yeah, definitely. And maybe that's what they thought was going to happen. Is that they really didn't know kind of what they were going to use the backhoe for. It was still kind of a wild card at this point. Maybe they thought that they were just going to be marching in there and would be in a position where they're not looking like they're just going in first time to actually pull off the heist. They're not sending in someone to be like, hey, check if the coast is clear.
Do you think the thought was that they were going to dig their way under the tunnel or dome?
I have no idea. I want to say that on the back, it didn't even have a bucket on the back. I want to say I saw images where it didn't even have that.
It's just car ramrod.
Yeah, I don't know.
Should have had a spike.
Unnecessary weight or something that they didn't need to be carrying. But I think also at that point as well, it was more so to the fact of like, no, we're not going to send in the regular tour guides for this. We'll have most of our guys for this section anyway, just strictly be like flying squad officers in disguise.
Any regular workers, though, had to know that something was up.
Yeah. To a degree. I mean, you would know that something was going on, especially when they're like, yeah, they gave me a week off. It's crazy. Like, I just get paid for
paid vacation.
Like, fuck, I want to work in the money zone. So they're ready to go. And wouldn't you know it, all of a sudden, down at the abandoned coal yard, the JCB fires up. They're like, okay, shit, this is going down. They got surveillance all the way there. Shatford is up in the Millennium Dome surveillance room looking at all the CCTVs footage, and it starts moving down the road, starts moving toward the Millennium Dome. It's getting fucking closer. All of a sudden, guess what? The speedboat starts taking off from its launching point on the River Thames, and it makes a pass by the Millennium Dome. It's in the water. It's ready to go. And all of a sudden, they get reports that there's been a car accident outside the Millennium Dome. Cops are responding as they do for, an accident like that and everything. So all of a sudden, now you have an active police presence. They end up seeing this, stop for a second, turn around. JCB heads back to the abandoned coal yard. Boat turns around, heads back.
Who do you think was more disappointed?
Shatford.
You think Shatford was more disappointed in the criminals?
This is the second, okay, so Shepard has no idea if this thing is going to now be abandoned or what's going to happen with this. He's still in a position where he's probably on really thin ice.
Yeah.
Based on that first operation.
For sure.
He's got to be looking at this thing and being like, that we didn't even go. If we have to try to go at them now, it's going to be nothing but conspiracy charges because technically they haven't. What are we going to get them? Did you have a permit to drive the construction vehicle on the road or any of that shit?
We got a stolen JCB. That's pretty much all.
I don't even think it was stolen.
Where would they be getting the money?
Depends on if the thing actually worked as it was intended. If like the bucket and that stuff wasn't functional, and if it didn't, the backhoe didn't work, it's kind of useless to some people. Plus, I mean, they went and bought a boat for 200 or 2,000 pounds. They probably had a little bit of money that they were fronting based on the enormous payday they were expecting to get, right?
True. Yeah. And Millman wasn't exactly saving for the future. We'll talk about that later. So maybe he sprung for some fun gifts, fun parting gifts.
So this thing, ruined, right? Like this thing's not going down. This was the only opportunity that they had to be able to get the speedboat in there. Or was it?
You got to refer back to the tidal map.
Yes.
You got to check and see where the tides are going to be.
And
because that's a normal thing that Operation Magician would do. It'd be like, oh, let me go run the numbers on the tides again.
Give me the tide guy. And he comes in and he's like, yes, Mr. Shafford. He's like, is this the only opportunity? He's like, well, wouldn't you know it? But the 7th will actually show that it'll still be a high tide. So he's like, okay, I mean, we got to risk it. These guys, they've already made plans like this all the way up to this point. They're going to give it a go the next day. Now we come to the fateful day of November 7th.
You know what else is going on November 7th, 2000?
What?
Bush v. Gore.
Really?
Yep. That was election day.
Maybe that's why we didn't hear about this.
Possibly.
Because had nothing else been going on, we would have definitely heard about this. So now we come to it.
This feels like a newsworthy story anywhere around the world, right?
Yes, it does. November 7th. They're ready again. They've got all of the guys back in there. They're all in their disguises, up in the surveillance room and everything like that. And wouldn't you know it, early morning kicks around. That JCB starts up at the abandoned coal yard, and that thing starts working its way back down to the Millennium Dome. All of a sudden, boat's in the water. And it's heading over.
Yeah. The setup of this whole area, and we'll talk about what's going on. So as the JBC is seen leaving the coal yard, it is actually being filled. They had to have altered this because they had Betson, they had Cochran, they had Bob Adams, and they had Aldo all inside the JBC.
Bob Adams is a guy that apparently had just joined like the day before. So they think somebody backed out that was, got cold feet or wasn't able to step back in, but he plays a pretty significant role in this thing. He
plays Thor.
Yeah. They said it was a modified cab. They made some alterations to it, which they would have to if you're trying to fit that many guys down low in the cab itself. And then the bucket that they had it raised up to where it was probably about eye line, but they had actually taken and cut like 3 big holes in the bucket so they could actually see through it. And I'm guessing he was in that position just because that was going to be what they needed to ram something with.
Yeah, probably protection from impact, some sort of cover.
The windshield as well. Yeah, definitely. So this thing comes rumbling down the street and ends up, kind of entering. There was a construction portion still near the Millennium Dome where there was like a bunch of like sandbanks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There was a little road. It would be what you would consider like a maintenance road or like access or something. This thing pulls in. It just looks like a piece of construction equipment. Well, I mean, there were no other ones there, but it pulls in and gets into like a little back area where it's still accessible. They haven't like entered a gate or done anything like that yet. And 9:33, all of a sudden, this thing starts to rev up, starts to build up a head of steam. And they ram this thing into a cement pillar that, from what I could tell, and again, the security footage is grainy, when you get those like 4-foot tall cement pillars that will go right in the middle of something, they have them in front of like a lot of stores.
Usually to stop like bikes or anything wide
Not only
coming
bikes,
through.
but if a runaway car was heading toward the storefront, it would hit the big pillar. Like Costco has them in front of everything. They ram this thing, knock it down, and then get into the grounds of the Millennium Dome at this point. So now you've just got this like backhoe hauling ass through like the back area of the Millennium Dome, and all of a sudden they start running up on a security gate. Don't even let off the gas, just plow right through the security gate. And they're heading for the section where it's the outer section, and then right inside is on the same side as the money, the money zone.
Well, that's the other crazy thing about the money zone too, was not only were the diamonds in there, but there was just 1 million pounds of actual money that had been displayed on the walls.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we're not just talking about diamonds, we're talking about cash in there too. So you got to expect that they're hitting the diamonds. Why would you not go for the biggest prize?
True.
At the same time, there's also a lot of other very important, valuable things in there.
Yeah. I mean, that the main goal was that. I think if they maybe figured if they got through it quickly enough and had a little bit of extra time, maybe as a bonus going after that kind of stuff.
Even just to put anything else on the display in jeopardy, like if you're
Shefford.
Yeah, if you're Shatford or you're the De Beers people and you're watching that, or you're running the Millennium Dome, it's like, there's a lot of important stuff in there. They better not hit anything else. Please, God, don't let them run through anything else. Mm-hmm. You just ran through a security barrier. You're running through the wall.
Not yet.
But that's where they're heading, because what else are you going to do at that point? Millman's on the other side of the river sitting in the van. You have Kevin Meredith that's in the boat down in the water.
No. Millman was in the boat.
Millman was in the van.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, because he gets caught drinking the tea.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Kevin Meredith was the man that was in the boat. He kind of came along just like Bob Adams. I think they were kind of added right around the same time. Millman wasn't doing well at this point in time, so I think that maybe they might not have wanted to rely on him. Millman gives an excellent line towards the end of this, but yeah, where are they going to hit?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and what ended up happening right before this whole thing went down, as I don't know if it was before they rammed like the pillar to actually get through the area, all of a sudden, and they had this place kind of controlled. They, at this point, knew that they were going to be trying to rob it here, and there was a guy who actually ran the Millennium Dome. I don't know if he was like the head like financier or whatever, but he actually kind of got into it with Shafford because he's like, no, why you like get these guys now? Why are you telling me you need to let them get into the dome to do this? And he's like, if we can get them inside, we can effectively trap them in here. It'll be a lot more secured. It'll be a lot more controlled. It's a lot less likely that anyone's going to get hurt. And how badly would it look if all of a sudden this was in an area that we didn't control and some of your bystanders got hurt? Like, this place would shut down. So finally the guy was like, okay, yeah, you're able to go and pull off this operation here. So right before this thing goes down, all of a sudden, like a Hollywood movie script, a school bus full of children show up to the Millennium Dome and start coming out and are heading into like closer to the area where the money zone is.
What are the chances?
What are the chances? And so they thought that this thing was going to, they were going to have to call off the whole thing because of this. But thankfully, they were able to get officers down there and kind of redirect them and get them out of the area that was going to have the danger. So security gate's been plowed down. JCB's still moving.
Yeah.
It's coming up to the side of the dome. They got to get out and go through like a door or something like that, right?
Yeah.
No.
Well, they wreck through everything just to get in there. They don't need to keep going.
What?
They can probably gain access somehow. Now that they
don't.
Or you just keep driving.
And they just keep giving it gas because this thing, you can watch footage of it.
It's awesome.
This thing plows through the outside of the Millennium Dome and plows right in and in front of the Money Zone and the De Beers exhibit. They pull right up next to it.
For as ham-handed as this plan was, they knew exactly where to hit with the digger.
Oh, yeah.
Or the JCB.
Because, when they hit, it's not like because if you look at the inside of this, it's one of those buildings that you can see all of the exposed, like, metal scaffolding and, like, structural stuff and everything. They had to avoid all of this while basically driving through, like, a section you're not supposed to be driving through and know exactly where to access it to get right in front of this De Beers exhibit. So this thing pulls in. Two of the guys jump. I think maybe all of them, maybe one of them was still in the cab.
Betson stays in the cab.
Okay.
Cockrum jumps out. Bob Adams jumps out. Aldo jumps out. They're all wearing gas masks and protection. I believe they had on bulletproof vests.
Some type of body armor.
Yeah, something similar to that.
No weapons. Well,
sort of.
Okay.
'Cause
No firearms.
Aldo jumps out. Aldo throws a smoke bomb. He throws an ammonia bomb. Now, the smoke bomb is going to conceal them.
Yeah.
The ammonia bomb is going to stink to high hell, and anybody that's in that area is going to clear out. It's just basically like chemical warfare to try to keep people away. That's why they're wearing the gas masks. Bob Adams comes stepping out with a sledgehammer, ready to go. And you're thinking, well, how long are they going to be in there? Because they said that this can withstand 30 minutes of a beating from like anything on Earth.
Like a power tool. Like
Yeah.
a power.
Power tools.
They've got like, and so the head of security for De Beers is also up in the CCTV little area watching this as well. And so as they're walking in, he's like, that's all they're walking in with that. Like, there's no way he already knows that this thing isn't going down because, behind this false wall, there's a bunch of cops. There's a bunch of cops over in this area and everything. They're just waiting for them to essentially start in on the attempted theft. Because at this point, it's just destruction of property.
Yeah.
As soon as they start trying to steal this thing, then it essentially becomes the robbery. So, yeah, Adams and Aldo run in there, and Aldo has this like industrial
Cockrum
had it. Yep. Okay, the industrial nail gun, and goes up to the front of this thing.
Industrial nail gun. It's basically what they had was a concrete nail gun.
Okay.
The differences in these guns, I believe it was a Hilti brand. You have an air powered nail gun, an air nailer. You're going to need an air compressor to run that. They have battery powered ones now. This concrete nail gun is cap. So you put a black powder cap in it to fire a steel nail directly into concrete. This thing's no joke. This is like the strongest nail gun that you can get, which comes into play because you have, if you shoot a bullet at that glass, it's got a blunt enough face on it that it's probably not going to do a whole lot.
And also that metal is so hot that it's simply going to hit. And yeah, it'll absorb some of the impact, but it'll spread it out. That's the whole point, is trying to spread this out. That's where the security glass is effective. And so as he fires these nails into this, it's not creating holes to where they're able to reach through and get the diamond. They're not that big, but what it does is all of a sudden it punctures all the way through and weakens the structural integrity of the glass. So I want to say, did he put in 2 or 3?
5. I believe it was 5 nails that he was able to fire into it.
Puts 5 of these things in, and the security for De Beers is just watching this being like, what the hell? And all of a sudden, Adam starts going to town with just a sledgehammer on this thing, and the glass starts flying. This thing is breaking apart. And the guy from De Beers is just like, oh shit. Like, the diamond's not real or anything. But at the same time, he's sitting there being like, it takes someone 30 minutes to get through this thing.
You bragged to everyone.
Yes, exactly. You said that this was the reason that this couldn't happen, even if they did it during the daytime.
He's probably sitting next to Shatford. He's like, call the boys in. Shatford's like, not yet.
He's sitting there with a stopwatch being like, we're 35 seconds and they're getting pretty close to that thing.
But they haven't gotten through quite yet. We don't need to keep this up. Just send your guys now.
So it comes to the point where all of a sudden, because of the timing, the boat is actually pulling up to the little dock that they had there at the Millennium Dome. It's ready to pick them up. They're getting through this glass, and they actually end up, the end result is they get a hole.
Yeah, they
probably
made it.
About as big, if not a little bit softball size.
Probably.
In order to go ahead, and they don't get this thing, because pretty much at that moment, Shatford is like, fucking send the boys in. False wall comes down, and the 2 guys that are out near the JCB or out at the JCB are just swarmed with these armed officers and go down instantly.
Aldo gets taken down. Betson gets taken down. Betson immediately is like, I was a hostage.
Yeah.
I had no part in this.
Someone said, like, I work here or something like that. They take stun grenades or flashbangs and throw them into the vault. And imagine the concussion inside a sealed metal box. And so this completely incapacitates the other two guys in there. They weren't able to reach through and get the fake diamond or anything like that.
They were still attached inside there.
Yeah, exactly.
They would have had to have cut
They needed
them.
a little bit more time. Police boats that had been hidden at locations that were nearby completely swarm in and pen the boat in there. And they move on because they're surveilling everyone. They move on Millman.
In the white van.
Who's in the van. And did they move on somebody else?
There's a couple other stories about there was a lookout out front.
Wenham? I think they picked up Wenham too.
I don't know if Wenham was there, was he?
I don't think he was.
So when they roll up on Millman in the van, Millman's having his tea.
As one does. And
they tell him to get out of the van. His first response is, "Are you denying an Englishman his tea?"
Which is that's not crazy. But man, like you're towing a boat around with a van. That in itself just seems weird.
Yep. Yeah, and you're in the middle of like the biggest heist of your life, and you're just going to stop and have a cup.
It's tradition, man. They take that shit seriously.
That's the most relaxed guy around when he's like, "Oh, we're in the middle of this. I got to have my morning tea." That's nuts.
That's probably keeping his nerves down. He's like, I don't need anything with caffeine, just something to...
The hand is just shaking on the teacup.
So these guys end up all getting arrested for this. If they, I'm trying to picture it. If they didn't have them under surveillance, they would have had that thing busted open. The response on that would have been the cops not even being there.
Yeah.
Maybe it takes them, especially to get into that section and everything. I'm not sure. I didn't look at a map of it to see how far that was from the water. Because, of course, they're not jumping in the JCB again. They're grabbing the diamond, whatever else they can.
Run into the closest.
And they'll run into the closest exit to get down there. But I wouldn't imagine that thing smashed through. They were already in the vault, had the thing smashed down in like 90 seconds, getting the hole in there. Let's give them and just say 90 more seconds that they needed to go ahead and reach in to get it out of the housing or whatever. Maybe grab the other diamonds, maybe grab something else. And
you grab one of them, you're set.
Yeah. And then you're out the door. Maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes to get down to the boat. Fuck, you could have been gone out of that thing in maybe 6 minutes.
You still have De Beers security there. You still have all of the other alarms that could have been tripped. It would have been a whole lot of other things to get around, but I think that's just it, is their ability to pull this off, had they not been surveilled, was everything that happened after they broke into the display case.
Yeah.
If they're able to do that in enough time to where the response time for the De Beers security is showing up and getting through the smoke and avoiding the ammonia and then just finding them.
Because no one's going to raise anything until that thing crashes through. Maybe when it crashes through the gate, if there's a security guard saying that, but the time between crashing through the gate and crashing through the wall was pretty small.
Yeah. Minute, 90 seconds, maybe, just that fast.
Maybe. But again, you don't then have a presence on the river because you don't know that it's these same guys that are trying to pull this off. So again, you're not suspecting that to be the case. And yeah, man, I think if they don't have them under surveillance, I think this thing goes off.
There's a book that was written with some liberties taken from the story side of the robbers. This is confusing to me. Supposedly the story goes was as they hit this place, as they got to the boat, they would get over to the boat, they would get out on the other side of the river, they would drive back to, I believe it was Kent, where they would go to a pub. They were supposed to be at that pub by 10:15 in the morning to meet the fence for that diamond.
9:33 is when the thing first rammed that cement pillar to get into the area of the Millennium Dome. Not through the actual dome itself, but 9:33. So they were probably into the dome by 9:35 to 9:36. Yeah, I mean, it sounds really audacious when you say it like that, but just thinking how quickly they probably could have gotten over. The longest portion would have been the drive in the van back to the bar.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's not even the most ridiculous part of it is, so that book kind of indicated that they were selling it to the fence because, of course, like we mentioned, what do you do
Yeah.
with this thing? Like, I can see the rationale in the 2 armored truck because that's cash. You take that and you do have to probably launder it, or you do have to do
Mark
something
bills, you
because,
got to figure out how to break it up.
yep, exactly. But again, that's something that you can then take to a fence or someone that does that. That's gonna, yeah, take a bunch off the top, but you're still going to be getting at least half of that probably in
Good
exchange.
chance.
In this situation, the amount that was, and again, once this Netflix documentary comes out about this, some of this stuff that we've talked about might have more light shed on it. It's going to be, a lot of it is going to be from their side. Whereas most of the information we get is from the flying squad and from Scotland Yard and everything. But $500,000 is what they said, or is what was said that they were going to receive for this diamond. A 200, and I know I keep interchanging dollars and pounds. I'm sorry about that. 200 million pound diamond, even if they were getting 500,000 pounds, dividing that up between 7 guys.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Ends up equating, I think we talked about it last night. The math could have been wrong because we were kind of high.
Well, if it was 8 guys, it would have been 40,000.
Okay.
So 7 guys at 500,000 is probably 42,
Something like that.
41, 5, something around there.
What are you doing? What are you doing for 40,000? Like, oh my God.
Millman could go buy himself 40 speedboats, or he could go buy himself 20 speedboats.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like a lot of speedboats.
It does. It
but
does.
Still, like the risk and what had to be done to only get that much, that to me is the dumbest part of this entire thing. And again, maybe true, may not be true. Hopefully the documentary sheds. If it ends up coming out and they're like, yeah, it was 500,000, I'm just gonna be like, come on, guys.
Even at 500,000 a person, it still doesn't feel like enough.
I could see it at 500,000 a person. Okay, how many times is that?
What do you mean?
Okay, so you have 40, and then you have 500,000. How many more times is that?
12 and a half.
At least there's some justification there. At least you're in fucking 6 digits.
But what are you going to do with it?
A lot more than you're going to do with 40.
$500,000 isn't enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life.
Getting out of the fucking country and doing something like that probably a little bit more
Expats,
so.
Spain, probably. Yeah, maybe. It doesn't seem like the score of the century. It doesn't seem like it would be worth it for the $200 million.
Had they pulled this off and this information regarding this supposed amount never got out, you would assume that these guys were able to just simply disappear and live like the fucking Fast and the Furious crew after they just robbed a Mexican drug lord.
On a yacht in Aruba.
Yeah, exactly. When in actuality, it's a speedboat on the Thames. Not quite the luster that other one has. But alas, they did not succeed with this. They did not go to the fence. They didn't make their $40,000 for doing this. They got arrested and they all got taken to different precincts to start being questioned.
Hey, I got to break them all apart. Mm-hmm. I'm sure do you think they even worked on a story?
No, they didn't think they were getting caught.
Yeah, what's the point of working on a story?
Yeah, when your story is, I'm a hostage or I work here.
It's loser behavior.
That to me seems like a real, like, firing, shooting from the hip type stuff.
We're going to look real stupid if we put Gertie 3 on this one and we get caught.
I know.
We're going to have a lot of explaining to do.
I feel like it had to be on there somewhere.
Should have been.
So, I mean, this is pretty cut and dry, right? They allowed them to get to the point where it would be open and shut.
Yeah. Well, and that's the inherent risk that we talked about, because I'm a big proponent of the fly squad being, I would say, maybe risking too much for this. And I don't know if we'll talk about the sentences that get handed out. Maybe just conspiracy and trying to get them on the prior 2 robberies wasn't going to be enough time to put them away. But to allow this to go down in all of the moving pieces to where their last armored car heist, they used weapons. They used guns.
Yeah. So the expectation had to be like, well, if that had to be, I mean, they had so many armed officers. Like all the ones closest there were prepared for a gunfight. And that's what you had to expect because everything else escalated on this. They're going so much larger than just an armored truck with this that there's no reason for them to think, hey, they were prepared to do this for an armored truck heist. They got to be prepared to probably do some much crazier shit for trying to steal this diamond.
The fact that they let this get as far as it did, too, I think they called it like an asphalt mission or a pavement assault or something like that they had to get on these guys to enable to prosecute them the right way. To me, I look at that and I think, well, conspiracy charges to not put the entire public at risk. Granted, the Millennium Dome wasn't exactly packed in November of 2000.
That's probably one of the only reasons that they were allowed to do this too. They're like, come on, guys, we're in November. Crowds are already dwindling even more so than they were. This place was never popular. To be honest, we're not having to keep that many people out of the money zone.
I gotta feel like there's a moment in time where if that digger had run over one of the police officers, it'd be like, wow, we just sacrificed 2 police officers when we knew about these guys 6 months ago.
Yeah, no, I completely see where you're coming from on that. You're thinking of it from the Harvey Dent school of thought, where in Batman, he's like, we can go ahead and arrest all these low level guys. Yeah, we won't get the big guys because they'll, plead out or do whatever. But you can have clean streets for like a series of like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
You'll be able to go ahead and do that. Keep these guys off the street, get them in for this. You're minimizing all the risk of this operation because, again, this thing could very easily turn into a firefight in this place. Very luckily that it didn't. I think because they hadn't caught him on the first time for the armored truck, they hadn't caught him on the second time. I don't think, and because they had also used weapons the second time and they had to have something that they could get them and almost get them hard enough to where they would also be paying for that.
Yeah.
To keep them in long enough to where it would almost kind of be like a dual punishment for both this heist, but then also for the other 2 that they couldn't directly tie them to.
There also comes a point of no return, too, when you've spent so much money on surveillance and on just everything that they have.
That's the other thing, too, is like if you were to break it down and being like, okay, here we go. What sounds better? You have Operation Magician. Operation Magician was able to head off a suspected heist of the Millennium Star. They were able to arrest the culprits, and they were sentenced to conspiracy to commit robbery, and they were sentenced to 3 years. People are looking at that and being like, oh shit, like those guys are going to be out in 3 years that just tried to do this, or Millennium Raid thwarted. And they couldn't bank on this, but the headline ends up being Millennium Raid thwarted. No casualties or no death. Because I think there were a couple casualties of somebody getting but injuries that were recovered from. But to not have any officers or anyone like that killed and to be like, we caught them in the act, they're going away for 15 plus in the situation. I think from a public, because you're spending close to the same amount.
Potentially.
Or, I mean, depending on how much those last 2 setups cost and everything, which I'm sure was pretty exorbitant. But
had they shut it down before they did the tail of the De Beers transit, probably cheaper.
Oh, much. Yes. Yeah. At that point, you're saving a lot of money in regards to that. But then again, that whole crew for conspiracy could be back planning something else 5 years from now with this same group. But
something bigger, potentially.
Yeah, exactly. So let's find out what did happen to our members of the Gertie gang.
November 8th, 2001. Almost all the robbers go to trial. The reason I say almost, and the reason that I might have led you on a little earlier when I said nobody dies in this, Millman ends up passing away of cancer before he sees his trial date. He knew this entire time that he had cancer. He decided to not go through any sort of procedures to try to take care of it. I believe it was stomach cancer. Guy's a career criminal. Doesn't seem like he's the peak of physical health at all times. It sucks. I mean, again, we're talking about criminals here, but there is a certain element of a robber that doesn't hurt anybody that I kind of cheer for a little bit.
But was the intention during that second one to... like, are you just firing to go ahead and like pin that officer down, or are you shooting to?
I think you are. If you don't have the balls enough to strap real bombs to your car and you use meat pies, I feel like you're more looking to try to deceive because you put real bombs on that car.
Yeah.
You're blowing it up anyway.
Maybe these guys didn't have the know-how to build real bombs, and so they were kind of forced
Well,
to use the
they blew up the cars.
That's absolutely true. One thing too, and this is the guy that actually got brought in like the day before, the sledgehammer dude,
Bob Adams.
Bob Adams. He was actually had been brought in for attempted murder, not for this, but for an unrelated thing. So he wasn't in there in the first two ones. I think there's really no distinction, especially like I can see it from your point of view, but I don't think from the law standpoint there's any distinction between like, oh, he was just firing over my head trying to scare me. Like it's the intent is there.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I see that. I understand it. You can't, no matter what, you can't fire a gun at a police officer.
Or anyone. Yeah,
just don't do that. That's a bad thing. But at the same time, I mean, this is almost a Harry and Marv type situation.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you root for them. You know that it's going to be 10 times funnier when they end up catching a wrench or a brick to the forehead.
I think that's why we can talk about this in the way that we're talking about it, where we're not having to be fucking gloom and doom. Like, this is fun. This is a fun fucking topic. And here's the thing. We don't have to talk about anyone dying except the dude that died of cancer.
Yeah.
Before the trial happening. Had this led to a bunch of casualties or had something fucking happen with those kids, we'd be addressing this from a very different perspective. But looking at it, we're able to almost take the same view as their defense attorneys arguing basically like, hey, if you really want to think about it, this is just kind of like a B&E with a little bit of attempted robbery. I mean, yeah, it was a larger in scale. They crashed, construction equipment through this thing, but they didn't go after anybody. Nobody was hurt, and they were just trying to steal this diamond.
It's dumb enough to argue that it was almost a victimless crime.
Yes. The only victim, victim is going to be De Beers, and nobody likes them.
Well, and their defense attorneys argued that their sentences should be like they didn't argue anything that they did. That wasn't the idea. A good defense attorney isn't going to face all of the bad evidence. He's going to try to make the bad evidence look less bad.
It's the situation where you're sitting with your client, and do you remember on Role Models where David Garbin, where she's talking to him and he's like, I didn't do that. And he's like, they have the security footage. He's like, look at me, David Garbin, stealing TVs. He's like, that is not me. It's kind of that scenario where they're sitting there being like, yeah, we didn't do that. And the guy just hits the play button and it's them casing the joint the entire time, driving the fucking construction equipment. And he's like, yeah, that we're just going to have to try to argue that you guys weren't stupid enough to use guns in this.
And that's the defense. We did this. We didn't use any deadly weapons, completely negating the fact that they drove a JCB through the side of a building and could have hurt or killed anyone that was in front of it.
That's what I'm saying is like, that's the thing too, is it's not like you can be like, we didn't hit anyone. Like you realize there could have been like maintenance staff or crew or anyone standing on the other side of that wall that you would have had no idea. There could have been standing someone on the other side of that security gate behind the wall. And when that thing swung open, it could have fucking killed them.
Could have thrown that ammonia bomb. Somebody has a reaction, has a seizure, dies.
Yeah.
Just really anything. You could have ricocheted one of those nails off of the exhibit and hit you or someone else in the head.
Which, I mean, if it hits you, we're really not too upset about that. But had it hit someone else or, the thing is, too, is they go into that De Beers vault. No one's in there. There could have easily been people in there. And the only reason there weren't people in there, their argument's like, well, there wasn't anyone in there because we had fucking surveilled you and we had taken everyone out of there.
Yeah. We wouldn't be making the same argument if those children had been in there.
Yeah. There's a reason there wasn't maintenance staff sitting right there because we knew you were coming.
Judge doesn't buy it. Judge, rightfully so, he understands that this is just a bad faith argument.
Is he wearing the wig, you think?
Has to be.
Yeah.
Because every documentary or podcast that I listened to, they called the courtroom the same thing, and it sounded like some old flowery British name, so I'm sure it was...
It's not the barrister or... Yeah.
Something along those lines. So they pitch a few more things at the wall. They pitch that there was an inside guy that they were working for, this and that. None of it ever really comes to fruition as anything that would make any sense. Betson and Cockram, Both get 18 years. Eventually, on appeal, it gets reduced to 15. Aldo ends up getting 15 years. Bob Adams got 15 years. Meredith gets 5 years for driving the boat. Lee Wenham gets 4 years for that, and he gets 9 years for the Islesford raid. Mm-hmm. So he, out of everybody, I'm sure Millman, had he survived, would have been charged with it because they had his fingerprints. Yep. Since the cars were used, they were found on his property. Islesford pretty much gets pinned on Wenham himself because that's the only concrete evidence.
Yep.
And, I mean, I'd like to say that these guys learned their lesson. Betson ends up getting let out a little bit early. He ends up getting convicted a second time in 2014 for a botched raid on a cash depot that happens in 2012 and gets 13 more years. I don't imagine they let him out on good behavior early the second time, right?
No, but the simple fact that he only got 13 years on that second one is kind of incredible. I mean, the first one you get 18 years. This one, he was like, okay, so I learned from the last one that I got 18 years on. So when I attempted to rob this, I did not blow up any cars. I didn't use any construction equipment that could have hit anyone. I actually did this about as softly as I could, which is probably why it wasn't successful.
Do you think on the second one he tried to do the first thing he did during the Millennium? Like when the police showed up, he's like, I was a hostage.
Probably. It's like, shit, no, that's not what I meant to say. You also got to think about the guys he's planning this with.
Yeah.
So these guys' names are all over the papers. This is huge news over. It's the largest attempted robbery or heist that's ever occurred. Not large in scale, but for what it was actually going to steal and the value for that. And all of a sudden, you walk in, you got a guy, and he's like, okay, we're going to put together this crew. We're going to go ahead and raid this cash depot. You all join together Reservoir Dog style. You're all meeting each other for the first time. They're like, and this is Betson. Everyone's like, Betson. The fucking...
The Millennium guy?
The Millennium Dome guy. They're like, he's like, yeah, that's me. He's like, and also the dude that they tried to tie back to the 2 failed armored truck robberies. He's like, yeah. And he's like, I don't want to know. What is he doing here? He sucks at this.
You're cursed.
Yeah. Get this guy out of the fucking crew.
Bad juju. Hey, I mean, they weren't rocket scientists, but at the same time, you got to give them just a little bit of credit because, as you said, had they not been surveilled, there is a chance that this happens.
Yeah.
Whatever they get out of it's whatever they get out of it. Mm-hmm. I would say that almost more impressive than whatever you're getting out of this financially is that you stole something of that caliber.
Yeah.
That's a story that you can tell to every one of your robber friends, because I'm sure that's probably all you don't have a lot of straight people in your life, like a straight-laced good person in your life.
Yeah, there's a certain element that you probably hang around with.
That's a story you can tell at every single pub and probably never have to pay for a beer again in your life.
So I'm just kind of going through my head of pretending the situation didn't have them being surveilled. So they're not watching them at the farm. They don't know essentially that there's going to be this boat involved. They have no idea that they're going to use this construction equipment to crash through.
Any day.
And any day that it can happen. The only way I see this thing being solved or being resolved essentially is once this whole thing goes down and they're going back through all of the information to find out what happened, they're eventually going to be like, we're going to have to review so many hours of this fucking CCTV footage. They're going to review it. And eventually I think they put the pattern together because they know what they're looking for. They know they're looking at that area. They know that they're going to try to match up people who are in that area repeatedly. And 6.5 million people visited this thing during the year. That's not a lot. That's very few. So when you start to see the same faces pop up in the months leading up to this thing, you're going to eventually tie it to the people who were actually caught on camera. I think there were only 4 of them that actually got kind of caught actually looking around that.
Still very low res film.
No, I know. But what I'm saying is that also means that you have so much, those people have had so much of a head start.
Yeah.
But at the same time, how far are you getting on $40,000 if that's the case too? So there is a likelihood that someone ends up getting pinched for this because it's probably going to be people still hanging out around the area. And then they're going to go back and they're going to try to tie it to other people who have done similar type stuff. So I don't see all of them going down, but at least I think a couple of them would have probably been picked up. But
there's also, like we talked about before, the De Beers element of they would figure this out.
Yes. So
probably before
the flying squad might not have even gotten to these guys while they were still living.
No.
Yeah.
No, not a chance.
But yeah, this is fun. And looking into this one, it's we're going to space it out a little bit, but I mean, if you guys thought this was nuts, we read some information on the next heist we're going to do, and it is bonkers.
Yeah, what's more important or what's more fun than a heist?
What's more fun than a heist that isn't successful? A heist that actually is successful.
Yeah.
And then there's a fucking manhunt.
And I believe that they said that this was the most expensive diamond heist in history.
Mm-hmm.
The next one, the Antwerp one. So, yeah, I mean, we're in a weird, corner of history. Very historic, though.
Oh,
crime history.
I love the fact, like, that's the beauty of what I'm going to, fluff us for a little bit. That's why I loved us picking this to actually do a podcast about, because anything, any avenue, any crevice of history we have the opportunity to look into. And again, this was just me and you bullshitting of being like, okay, organized crime, we need to get back into that. What are we going to do? We're trying to kind of separate what different gangs or what affiliations. Then all of a sudden it's like crime families. What about just crimes in general? And of course, when you're looking at something, you're like, fucking heists. Are like heists a real thing that occur on the scale of like movies and shit like that? And there are a few examples of ones that are. This one, being a prime example of that. And it's low stakes. No one got hurt. It's fun shit to learn about.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. When you look at the movie industry, I mean, some of the best action movies are heist movies.
Oh yeah.
And most of those heists, the Ocean's franchise, I don't think was just invented out of whole cloth. They had a lot of probably examples to look at to
Same
really
thing with
make
the
that
town.
movie. Yeah.
Because I mean, that's how they found out they were robbing Boston, or not, is it Red Sox Stadium? Fenway Park. Jesus Christ, why couldn't I think of that? That's how they found out they're going to rob Fenway Park, is they're surveilling the whole time. So, I mean, there's been snippets of this already pulled into, pop culture and everything. But yeah, this was awesome to look into.
For sure.
All right, buddy, you got anything else?
No, I think we're good.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed this little slice of irregular history, but still fun nonetheless. And we'll catch you next time.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit them with it.
Our Instagram is historically high pod, historically high pod, and we are on Twitter at historically high. That's historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.